During the last decade, the Greek port of Piraeus has undergone through a drastic transformation. This port has been a metaphor for Greece and was a blessed location bearing the history of ancient warriors. Nowadays, the port has taken on a new identity. It is now China's main gateway to Europe. In 2010, the port became the state-owned China Ocean Shipping Corporation, which 6 years later controlled all the port. In the last decade, Chinese companies have acquired stakes in 13 ports in Europe, including in Greece, Spain, and most recently in Belgium. These ports handle about 10% of Europe's shipping container capacity. Why is it happening? It is part of China's 21st century maritime Silk Road. It aims to connect the country to commercial hubs in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. The road actually refers to a maritime network, whereas the belt represents overland roads stretching through Central Asia to Europe. China, biggest exporting country with about $2.5 trillion in 2018, is the EU's second largest export market, adding up more than $1 billion in trade per day. And sea shipping outweighs rail or air freight. However, this plan implemented by Xi Jinping to advance Chinese trade raises a lot of questions, which we are going to analyze in this presentation. First, we will review the ports built in Europe and their role in trade for China. Then we will see the advantages ports open to European governments. Finally, we will analyze the possible risk officials are warning about. Why is a maritime route important for China? Mediterranean Sea is a crucial way for shipment of goods into Europe. Since the construction of the Suez Canal, it has become easier to access, relatively safe in terms of piracy, and shorter than the traditional land Silk Road or the navigations in southern seas. Thus, European southern ports benefit of a geographically strategic position. For this reason, Chinese main port companies, COSCO, Seaport, QDI, own relevant stakes in the ownership of various ports, in particular Athens, Genoa, Valencia, Marseille, Port Said, and there are negotiations ongoing for Trieste and Venice, the historic starting point of the Silk Road. Despite a lower traffic of goods in these ports, especially compared to the major ports of Rotterdam or Antwerp, China has undertaken relevant investments in order to enhance the infrastructure of the Mediterranean ports and create an efficient distribution channel to the northern countries. Thus, the overall Chinese foreign direct investment in the European Union in 2016 amounted to $37 billion. The reason for this enormous investment is that maritime way is shorter and economical compared to the carriage land itinerary across Central Asia. For example, shipping from Shanghai to Munich takes 33 days by sea compared to 43 days by land. Moreover, container ships have a larger carrying capacity than trains. But what is the position of governments towards the Chinese ownership of ports? Italy's government became the first major Western power to endorse China's Belt and Road Infrastructure project in April, as the country looked for ways to revive its struggling economy. Italy's populist government is anxious to leave the country from its third recession in a decade and saw China's plan as a way of helping its economy. When talking about France, the port of Dunkirk, the third largest in France, said recently that it would try to seize the opportunities offered by China's Belt and Road plan to boost trade between the two countries. In 2018, Duisburg, which is a city in Germany, had an unemployment rate of 12%. This was almost 4 times as high as the German average. Germany's China City for years has been a symbol of the challenges of long-term structural changes facing industry in the region. In Germany, some have been quick to sound a note of caution. If the still recovering industries in Western Germany make themselves too reliant on China, they warn, it could provide economic leverage for an authoritarian that wants to project its geopolitical power into Western Europe. Moving on, we see that even after Greece's exit from its third bailout in August 2018 and the government spending cuts implemented from 2010 till 2018 in return for these loans, unemployment is still running at 17%. Earlier this year, Greece has already become a member of China's 17+1 initiative, which aims to deepen cooperation between Beijing and 17 states in Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans. To mark Xi Jinping's visit to ASEAN, 16 new bilateral agreements were announced. The privatization of Greek infrastructure was imposed by international lenders as a condition of bailing out its economy. In general, the other countries are also in the play. Chinese port operators are also active in Belgium, Spain, France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Malta. Some of these countries have the highest unemployment rates in Europe and welcome Chinese financing of infrastructure. Local communities are often major supporters of China's participation in port development projects. This is the case for the construction of a new seaport in the Arctic city of Kirkenes, Norway, which could become another gateway for Chinese products shipped to Europe. The European Commission, which coordinates trade policy for the 28 member nations, has shown precautions and urged leaders to back its plan to limit access to European Union public tenders worth 2.4 trillion euros to companies from countries whose procurement markets were not open.
The Belt and Road Initiative can provide much-needed infrastructure financing to partner countries. But these ventures can also lead to problematic increase in debt.
But what could be the possible risks of such deployment? Concerns in the rest of the world, especially coming from Europe and the US, are emerging. Indeed, with these investments across the rest of the world ports, China is not only increasing its commercial power through ships, but also its naval power and influence. And there comes a collective security issue. Countries have to decide how much China can be involved in each economy without making concessions on their security interests. In 2017, the European Commission proposed a plan for screening of foreign direct investments. There is a growing concern about China's using its involvement in European ports to politically influence individual member states. Indeed, with its involvement in European ports, China would be able to monitor ships, to control supply chain for essential commodities like energy resources, and thus have a say on European or Middle East strategic activities. Zhang Ji, a researcher at the Chinese Academy of Science, has created a concept, first civilian, later military, to explain how commercial ports investments of China are the front door for the countries to cultivate political influence and then build infrastructure meant for military use. Its involvement across the foreign port contributes to the emergence of China as a global power. China's ownership of EU businesses is currently small, but has been growing over the years, peaking at 37.2 billion in 2016. The risk is that there is a relation of dependence that could be created if only one state or one company owns an area of your economy. Some concerns arise also about the working conditions on ports. Indeed, such companies have access to a huge workforce and can choose their own policy in terms of contract. Companies such as COSCO are cutting their costs to make fast profits, so they try to squeeze their expenses, regardless of the workforce, as it is the case of Piraeus container terminals in Greece. As COSCO is currently the biggest employer of Piraeus, fears are coming up that Chinese companies' strong attitude toward workers would expand as a norm in the area.